Welcome to Focus on Business, a podcast show for photographers with me, your host, Jane Goodrich. I'm talking to successful photographers so you can learn from our experiences and have the business of your dreams. So join us and let's focus on business. Hi, so today I am so excited to have Jeff Armstrong on Focus on Business podcast. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks so much, Jane. It's great to be here and I appreciate you having me. I'm excited.
Well, I'm really excited, and plus I love your Kentucky accent. It's great. In case you didn't know, Jeff is a fantastic wedding photographer, entrepreneur of all sorts, and more recently, photography educator. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Jane. Again, so good to be here. I love what you're doing. I think you got fantastic stuff going on here. And the ADHD energy that I feel in a good way has already been, I just know this is going to be an awesome conversation. We're going to have lots of good stuff that we cover.
I will say tell us a little bit more about yourself. But since you mentioned ADHD, I was late diagnosed in like February of 2020. And I think a light bulb went off and explained so many things. And I was actually talking to a friend who's a wedding photographer out of England, and he got diagnosed. And then he outed me in all these groups. And I was like, I guess I'm out, but then I own it. And I actually think it's something that makes us unique and makes us creative. And I think we just have to harness the positive side of it and deal with the negative in a way that, for example, my tip, I'll give one ADHD tip. If you've been overwhelmed, you've gone, you've like hyper-focused to death, know that the next day you're not going to be able to do anything and get out of neutral and give yourself some grace. That's the biggest thing for me.
That's a powerful thing, because then it's like, hey, I know that I've got a superpower.
Yeah.
And that superpower requires certain resources that if I don't replenish, I'm going to end up in a hole.
Yeah.
That seems very dark.
Yeah.
And for us as, entrepreneurs and just people that are out there creating.
Yeah.
I think that tip is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if you're out at a bridal show all day, you're going to be exhausted and peopled out like the next day. Don't expect yourself to go write a blog post the next day. Just give yourself a day off. All right, Jeff. Well, apart from our mutual ADHD, I don't like calling it a diagnosis because I don't think it's a diagnosis, but our unique brains. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a wedding photographer that, sort of became one out of a interesting season of realizing that I was not very well cut out for corporate. And so I was, going to school, trying to get the degree, and which I was doing fine at, but at one point, I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to graduate. And once I graduate, I'm probably going to maybe make $40,000, $50,000 a year. And maybe one day I'll make $80,000, maybe. And, because I was going into psychology and I didn't really like the clinical stuff. I was like, I think I want to be more sort of like a counselor or something along those lines. And that came out of a passion where I love teaching. I love interacting with people, very creative, and I understand people. And so I've, been a good listener, and I enjoy communication a whole lot. So that's all fine and dandy. But in the midst of that, I'm working a day job and trying to go, well, maybe I should be moving up here. And I just realized that there were certain people that they could work at a regular job and just do the things that they were supposed to do. And they could do that every day for the rest of their life. No problems. No, I had a conversation with a guy. He goes, yeah, I'll probably be here until I'm 80. And this guy was like 22. And, I go, well, why? Why do you want that so badly? He goes, oh, I just want the security. And in my mind, I'm like, security? What do you need security? Who cares about that? Like, I want to feel alive. Like, I don't care about security.
Same thing every day. Yep. I need a challenge. Yeah.
It's like, I want the challenge. I want the drive. And again, that kind of goes back to some of the superpower stuff.
Yep.
So for me, I started looking at going, okay, well, I've got a family that was growing at the time. I'm married and we had, 2 kids, and we're going, even once I graduate, like this with medical bills and, like stuff getting more expensive, it's not going to work. Even once I graduate, this is not going to be enough to really sustain us and keep the lifestyle that we had envisioned. And so, my wife, she likes to work, but she wanted to do something that she's very similar very creative, very good communicator, but she really wanted to be able to stay home with the kids and work as she found time to. And so again, we're like, how do we make this work? And, for us, it was a very, for lack of a better word, religious experience in a sense where we're like, we don't know what to do. I don't know where to get started. God, make something happen. And so the big transition point for us was, it was about literally 2 weeks after that desperation moment that my employer said, hey, we'll pay you X amount of money if you want to leave and just pursue whatever you want to do, like pursue your dreams. I was like, that's an oddly strange, specific answer to our desperate prayer,
And had you talked to them about it?
I didn't. It was a company-wide thing that they did. It was an offer to anybody. It was not just specific to me. So I didn't tell them that I was thinking that I wanted to pursue something. It was just literally like, it just happened. There's a lot of people that they go, man, I really want to go full time, or I really want to, start my business or whatever. And I hear them say things like, yeah, there's just not enough time. And they're going through all the stuff that I went through. I agree. I look back, we had no business starting a business. We shouldn't have been doing that because we didn't have the time. We didn't have the resources. Yet there were doors that opened along the way. I'm a firm believer that, and I'm not saying that you have a deep-seated belief in, God and all this stuff. I mean, you look throughout history, and when people start having a vision, it's almost like the brain starts spotting opportunities.
It's true. It's the reticular activating system in your brain. And I mean, I love studying the brain. We could sidetrack here all the time, but whether it's God, whether it's a higher power, whether it's just putting out into the universe what you picture for your life, what happens is, instead of just having some vague idea of, I'm going to go full time, but what does that mean? You have, I want to go start my own business so I can, and this is how I envision how it looks like. And the universe will start guiding you, helping you along the way, because you're also looking out for those things that will help you get your vision.
There's so many opportunities every day that pop up.
Every day.
And some of them are very small. Some of them are just like, for me, it started with, I know we want this. And this was in the early phases of just like, man, something has to be different. So I just started listening to audio anytime whether it was the commute to work and to home or whatever it was like, I just started learning and listening and observing. And what that does is you start opening up to the possibility instead of the fear that says you can't. And whenever you start becoming open to the possibility, that's when you start going, oh, wow. It could be so small. That was a big one, but there were so many little windows for us that opened before that sort of prepared us for the bigger windows. And then now there's been even bigger. I mean, I could go on and on, but long story short, we did go ahead and take that offer from the employer and we started our photography business. And I just want to reiterate, because I tend to shy away from this because it's uncomfortable for me. We were not in like financially a good place. I mean, we were, between medical bills and stuff, we probably had around $20,000 to $30,000 worth of debt. We were living in an apartment that had water damage, and it wasn't like that when we moved in. But then we woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning and there's like 2 inches of water from a thunderstorm because it was a lower level and it was like below ground technically.
Oh gosh.
I mean, it was a pretty bad situation in a sense of, like, my wife started developing crazy, weird asthmatic symptoms and food allergies, all like weird food allergies
from mold,
from the
basically.
mold exposure. Yeah. And so again, I think it's easy sometimes for people to look at where you've gotten to and they think, well, yeah, that's because they've got something going for them. They're just that way. They're so good. And I think that's a myth. If not for everybody, for a lot of people, I think it's important that they hear that there's people that have made progress that came from very bad places, that they didn't have the time, they didn't have the opportunity. And again, going back for us, it was like, okay, that's where the recognition, like we had to have this massive change. We weren't photographers. We were always creative, but we weren't photographers. And we didn't even get a camera until Michelle, she had her grandfather pass away. It was like the first close person to her to pass away. She goes, can we get a camera to remember people by in their happier times? So we had gotten a camera because of that. And I had sat and learned how to shoot it in manual because I'm obsessive. And so I was like, I didn't have a reason to other than I'm curious about this now. But again, there was these little things that all pulled together, again, because we're open to them and we see this sort of, for lack of a better word, grace to step through these opportunities. And so we started that business, our wedding photography business, in the 30-day window that I had, because the money wasn't going to be enough to just like quit. We had 30 days and I had gotten another job. That was another miracle because they made that offer and I was like, okay, that would give me 30 days. And then I need a new job probably. And so the company that was offering the application, it was rare for them to offer applications. They offered it. I missed the window. I think something with my application glitched. And so I was like, dang it, I missed it. And then they reopened it, which was crazy. They never do this. And so then I refilled out the application and they said, well, hey, yeah, you're going to start, but it's going to be about a month. Okay. So I got 30 days to start this business.
There you go. You need that timeline. Like, you need the deadline.
Right. I don't know what's right if this isn't right. So we started our business, which consists of a lot of dumb choices, spending too much on gear, a lot of money on gear that we didn't need because we were ignorant. But one thing that I think we did right was that we did our research and we were finding different courses and mentors. And so that was for us a big thing that, we did very quickly start charging. Our first wedding was a friend. That was the first one we booked, but the first one we shot, a mentor said, hey, you need to charge at least $1,200. So our first wedding we technically shot was for $1,200. And, then we started shooting weddings like around the $1,500 to $1,600 mark pretty quick. So this was March 2015, by the way, that we start the business, just to give you perspective. November of 2015, we got a mentor, very calculated choice, and we learned some stuff. And it's really funny because that mentor actually looked at our business and said, yeah, you probably should just keep your day job. Well, I'm really not one to listen to negativity. So I was like, okay, cool. But I paid attention more so to what they were doing and less to what they were saying, which I think is another lesson. So I said, okay, cool. Maybe you're right. I have to give this my all before I accept that diagnosis. So learned a lot about pricing and how to structure and how to really structure my marketing in a way that would attract people that would spend more money with me and how to then allow them to spend the maximum amount of money. And so our next client after that, so this was still in our first year of business, booked us for $7,500. And, so 7,500, actually they spent over 7,500 with us in our first year of business. And people say, man, you must have had a good portfolio. And, I can't do that because I don't have a portfolio. We had 3 weddings in our portfolio. 2 of them we had shot and they were not expensive weddings. One of them, my wife had second shot. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't like a luxury wedding or anything. And $7,500 in some markets for weddings is like, okay, that's pretty good, but that's not that much. But in Louisville, Kentucky, where we are, that's a lot for a wedding.
Yeah.
And so this was like, again, sort of a miracle for us because we're like, what in the world? I'm looking over my shoulder thinking, when's the FBI agent? That's,
you always do the first time you're like, is that real?
Me, like, I felt like something was wrong, like I was like, this is great, but I just made what I was making in my day job a third basically, because I was only making $25,000 a year maybe in my day job. And so it's like, I just made 75. Of course, it's like a deposit, so it is spread out still, but it on the books, that's about a third of my yearly income up to this point in one booking. And again, that was a culmination of learning and being open to opportunity and working through a lot of the mindset stuff that just allowed us to let it happen. That's one thing I think is so big. It's like, I don't look back and say, wow, we made that happen. I look back and say, we allowed that.
What's interesting is, I fundamentally kind of disagree with the mentor of like $1,200 because you're not making any money from that, right? So you're actually shooting you're actually paying somebody at that point to shoot. I mean, there's a minimum in this industry to make minimum wage, and I've done the calculations, and like weddings is like $4,000 to make $15 an hour if you're a full-time photographer. When people are like, oh, I can't charge $4,000, I'm like, you will end up making $15 an hour from that. Maybe if you,
Yep,
if
I
you do
agree.
on the average, if you do more than, the 25 weddings a year, yes, you'll make more money. But if you are editing, doing all that stuff, there's ways around it. The industry needs kind of a baseline minimum education of actually what
I
you should
agree.
charge.
Well, looking back, the mentor that we had, he was really more of like a school photo shoot
Hmm.
photographer, and he was somebody I knew. And I'm grateful that he said that because we probably would have shot that for free. Like, but
And then you
yeah,
sort of realize, pretty quickly that that's not sustainable, which I think
that's
is
not
great.
sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
100. It did give us, to just get the booking and then do a good job, I think did a lot for our
Yeah.
confidence.
Yeah.
So, I look back, it was good for our confidence and it got us moving. And then it's like, okay, we finally have a wedding in our portfolio. So when we booked that, it was like we had an engagement session. That's all
Right.
that was like it.
Yeah.
But I do think that, looking back now, yeah, $1,200, if you're shooting that, you are really undercharging unless you are looking at it and you're going, I've got a point and shoot camera and I'm shooting a 2 hour
Wedding. Yeah.
I don't want to criticize anybody if they're not charging more than that or say that you're wrong. But I do think that what I learned very quickly was a lot of the reasons that I wasn't charging more was not because of the customer, but because of my mindset and the way I structure my business and all the other things that tie into
Oh, I agree.
me just getting out of the way and letting it happen.
I agree. And I don't want to say that, oh, you're wrong, but I just want to give somebody the actual okay to be, you need to raise your prices and it's okay to, right?
Yeah.
As an industry, we've failed people by saying it's okay, just
Yeah.
make sure that you are doing what you love and your time is worth money. That's my rant. Anyway, so
Agreed.
you seem to have a really good backstory. Would you have changed anything differently of how you got to where you are or no?
Oh my gosh, yes, 100%. Like looking back now, Jane, oh my gosh. Number one, don't buy a bunch of dumb gear. And I know looking back, a lot of that was the ADHD side of things. And
No, I think
I
it's
didn't
just
say this
cool.
earlier.
I just honestly think photography is cool.
It is
I was a
cool.
gear hog. I ended up having to sell most of it because I never really used it. I was like, yeah, I think we all do it.
Yeah. And now, now I do have goofy gear.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is goofy gear. This is a Pentax 645 film camera with a 120 millimeter Xenon Cinelux lens.
And he's
Like
picking
this
it up by the lens and making those fixtures more
yeah.
loose. Yeah, that's not giving me
So
anxiety at all.
absolutely. Well, but now I can do that kind of, back then it was a bad choice to do that kind of stuff. But you get into it and there's all these things that I thought were going to make me successful.
Right.
Because I looked out and I saw what everybody else was doing. Well, successful photographers are taking macro pictures of the ring. So that means I need to take macro pictures of the ring. And number one, if that was the case, guess what? You can get a macro filter.
Right.
And you can use that. But we've had customers now at this point where that's over the 10K mark and they don't give a rip about macro pictures
Right.
of anything, much less the ring. And so I think the things I would change would be not spending unnecessary money, which goes back to having the correct perception of what is actually going to make you successful in your business and not trying to just fill in the blanks with things that you think are going to make you successful in your business.
Yeah, I think it's easy to fall back on something that like, oh, well, if I have that, it's going to make me better. I think I had just bought like the Canon 5D Mark III. I was like really excited about it. Had a backup camera of a Rebel because that's what I started with.
Yeah.
And the following year they came out with the Mark IV and I'm like, I'm going to wait a year. I'm going to wait a year, Jane. You just bought it. Do you know how long I waited?
2 months.
8 minutes on Amazon. I was like, I gotta get it. I gotta Adorama. Right. You're getting to me today.
Yeah, it could have been a shorter. It could have been 3 minutes.
I know. Thank you. You're giving me grace on the 8 minutes.
Control.
Yeah, that was a lot of control for me. I didn't pre-purchase it. Didn't pre-order it. So
it could have been much worse.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
I love it.
Then I needed the same lens because I wanted the backup camera. Just don't get me started. But I think at that point I was able to justify it because I was like 2 years into business or something like that. Yeah, definitely Don't overspend. And also I think that's actually a very good tip is like don't overspend. whose perception of what a successful photographer is. It's somebody that makes money at the end of the day from photography.
Yeah. And you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like you should enjoy it and have a fun time, but you're going to be more stressed out if you got all these bills to pay.
Right.
There's a part of me that does wish that if I was still going to spend as much money as I did, and here's how bad it was. Like, I just want to encourage people. I try to be honest with the stupid stuff that I did. We spent, Jane, almost $30,000 on gear when we first started.
That's a lot.
I look back and I'm glad that I went through that, because now when other people come to me and they go, hey, Jeff, what do you think I should do to be more successful and stuff? And they told me, yeah, well, I just spent $40,000 on gear. Look, I get it. Been there, done that. That was a mistake. That doesn't mean that you've ruined your life, but let me tell you my experience. That's hard for me to share now, knowing what I know. I look back and I'm like, what? You were this, and I share this because I don't want people to think that when you've been in the business for so long and you've reached a level of success, you've done the stuff. I think that there's a lot of people that go, oh, well, I guess they just did everything right. And the reality is I did a lot of stuff wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a level of embarrassment that I feel about it. But at the same time, but that should also be a testament of how, if you continue to do the right stuff over time, all that adds up and you learn.
Yeah, well, as long as you're taking the mistakes and learning from them, that's where I think is key. I mean, I'll make you feel better about your $30,000 and spending on gear is my background. I was working in advertising and I moved outside of New York. Okay, well, what do I need to do? I'm going to need to do ads, right? And so the first thing I see is this free paper, mind you. And then I was like, I want to be on the back page of that magazine because every family is going to be, I want to make an ad on the back page of that. I spent $10,000 because I got into a contract for a year. And I only got people calling me, do you want to advertise in Westchester Parent? Or can I have a donation? At least you had the gear, right? I had nothing. So I was like, poof. Yeah. I was like, oh gosh, made such a mistake. Yeah.
I think that's another industry thing that people go, oh, well, if I advertise in this, if I'm in the because again, they look at what other people, this is what we did.
Yeah.
We looked at what everybody else was doing and we go, well, that must be what makes them. Same with Google. We have people all the time that go, well, I'm just copying what everybody else on the first page of Google does. I'm like, please don't do that. That's not a good thing to do. Just because someone else is doing it and they have some level of success does not mean that that particular thing is what got them that success. Right. And I think I'm not against advertising. I think there's good ways to advertise, just like there's good ways to invest in education or mentors. Like, there's been things I've spent money on that I wish I hadn't have when it came to, certain levels of courses and stuff. But par for the course, I think mentorships and education has always been a better investment than blowing it on unnecessary gear. And I think advertisement is good when you have a really good idea, like evidence-based.
Yeah, this is like, I'm just going to do this because I can.
Versus, well, they're doing it. We look in the wedding industry. Oh, well, so-and-so is all over the wedding blogs. So we need to get published on wedding blogs. So therefore, we need to shoot this way because that's what wedding blogs like. And so we did that for a while where we got published in Style Me Pretty and Martha Stewart and so on and so forth. And you do that. And then it's like, wait a second, how come we're not getting any more business from that? That's what they're doing. And they seem to be successful, but this isn't helping us. And I remember finding out one of the photographers that we kind of like wanted to emulate. We had heard through the grapevine, they weren't doing that great. We thought they were doing great.
Yeah.
But they weren't. And so again, here we all are just trying to emulate and picking information out. And I think there's so many things that it gets away from the fundamentals. All of a sudden you're spending all this money. You're going, man, I'm not getting the payoff that I expected from it.
Copying somebody else, whether it's sort of what the work looks like or whether it's the tactic that they're using, you don't know the success, like you said, but also it's taking you away from your core, like what makes you unique. For example, there's so many marketing methods. I would probably recommend against doing a $10,000 back page ad. But, there's blogging, there's this and there's that, there's in-person. It's a massive pie and you just have to figure out where you gravitate towards which bits and what you like to eat. And then go from there versus like, I'm only going to do this because so-and-so does blogging. But that person also might be doing great in-person relationships, have great relationships with the wedding stylist if you're a wedding photographer. So I find that fascinating. I'm going to move that to a question on what do you have a favorite? I know your answer to this. I always know your answer. Do you have a favorite form of marketing? If you had to pick one and be like, this is what I'm going to build my business on.
I know what you think I'm
Oh,
going to
yeah.
say, so I'm going to be contrarian and say something more mystical and esoteric sounding first, and that's connection. Connection is the best form of marketing, meaning, if you're really good at rubbing shoulders and you can get out in the community and you can generate referrals that way, do that. Let's say you're really good at connecting through Facebook ads, which I think is very difficult.
I do too.
But you're just great at it. And I am going to get to what I think you think I was going to say. But if that's your thing, great. If you're really good at bridal shows and you just do the best at bridal shows and you connect with people and you love that, kind of going back to there's no one right way necessarily to do it. But for me, the defining moment for us was when we started going, okay, we were trying to do the whole networking thing, like going to all the meetups and all this stuff and developing the relationships with planners. And I was like, man, I feel like the people that are really good at this are 20. They can go out all the time and do that. And they can go have wine with the planner all the time and they can wine and dine. And they're charging less, like their work is good, but they're kind of charging less than they should be, and not super low. But I think there's a lot of ways that they're getting in and getting the favor that either I'm not willing to do because I don't want to devalue myself. That's how I felt about it. And then also I just don't have the time, genuinely, like I don't have the time to do it. And part of that's because I got 3 kids, I'm married, etc. So for us, well, what is the marketing method that is the least amount of ongoing effort, including wasting my time, quote unquote, wasting my time? What requires the least amount of ongoing input that just works sort of on autopilot?
Right.
It doesn't require a bunch of babysitting. And as we started analyzing, okay, bridal shows takes a lot to prepare. You got to have a whole setup. And everybody I talked to, bridal shows were always, you have a lot of budget shoppers. And not that you couldn't get them to spend more, which I'm big on, but a lot of what I heard about bridal shows, because I never did one. I've run a 6-figure per year wedding photography business. And I never did a bridal show. I looked around at ads and we tried the advertising thing a little bit. It just seems like there's got to be a better way. And so the big question mark for me kind of stood on, well, what about SEO and organic traffic, search engine traffic? Some of the photographers that seem to be really successful are doing that. So it was another one of those things like, well, they're doing this. So, they're on the first page of Google. So maybe they're getting a lot of traffic for that. Logically, it made sense because I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I can see that there are people, like I can use this keyword research tool to see that there are people that are actually searching. And statistically, they're getting X amount of traffic. And if there's X amount of people that are actually then inquiring, then if they're closing at, 20, 30, 40%, then they should be making this much money,
right,
based on those numbers. Logically for me, I was like, okay, maybe we should work on SEO. So I started looking around, looking on YouTube, how to do SEO. And again, kind of an interesting door of opportunity opened up where I became friends with somebody that worked for Google. They were part of the team that was being used to, without going too deep into how all this works, they were part of a team that was being used to reference and sort of train the AI algorithm that we have today. And so they actually worked from home and I would be there. They actually had a non-disclosure agreement with Google. So they didn't tell me stuff, but I would overhear stuff in passing, be exposed to stuff. And what I realized as I'm learning this information, I'm like, this is not the type of stuff that I'm hearing all the talking heads on YouTube. And when I do a Google search about how to rank on Google, it was different. It was different in the sense that the main focus was connection. I can go way deeper into that, but for now, just connection was the big difference. So I thought, okay, well, I ought to give this stuff a try. I did that very quickly. I don't remember the exact time frame, but I think it was somewhere between like 3 to 6 months. We were on the first page of Google.
Wow.
All of a sudden, we start getting these inquiries. And this is kind of twofold because we had gotten that mentor that taught me a lot about connecting with people on your website. And then I learned the stuff that I learned essentially from Google that was also about how to connect with people on your website. Google wants to show the most satisfying search results because they want to make profit. And if they show you bad websites, you don't want to use Google, you want to use Bing or whatever else. So if your website's the most engaging, it connects. It just connects. It entrances people. We did that, started ranking. That was a big turning point in our business, because now it's like we just had these inquiries coming in on a consistent, regular basis. And it was enough for us to begin becoming more what I call choosy. So sort of my avatar that I created for myself. I'm big on not creating just a customer avatar, but also a personal avatar. So people all the time talk, in the education world, oh, you got to have a ideal client, a ideal customer. Yeah. But we don't talk a lot about, but who are you in reference to your customer? Have you intentionally went through this, self-discovery and figured out, like, who do you need to be? Not just who do you need to be, but how do you help your people to see who you are? Because connection is really just a matter of, when there's a picture of me in their mind, I help them see themselves more clearly. So there's two pictures, the picture of themselves and the picture of me. When those exist in their mind and I've helped them to see those two pictures more clearly, there are neural pathways that connect in their brain. And the emotion around that is one of connection. And if you've ever felt connection with someone, it's a really good feeling. And so I just realized that when I do SEO, not just like traditional old school SEO that's largely been built on how do I hack the algorithm, and instead I focus on how do I actually create human connection on my website. That was for us the big game changer that allowed us to have more people coming in that go, yeah, I looked at your website, before they even talk to us, putting in the submission form, the contact form. Yeah, we've looked at your stuff and we just really feel you guys are it. For us, SEO, but I do make that caveat that I'm not referring to SEO in the sense of just putting keywords on your website and getting backlinks and blog a lot, just have a super fast website. Those things are things of largely of the past and are fading. And the new world of SEO is one of connection. Connection is the answer. SEO is the answer. I want to give you that because I think that's what you're expecting.
SEO in a purposeful way. I always like to ask that because I think I have favorites. I have a few favorites. It's like picking one child. You can't really do it unless you have one child like me. And then you can pick. Anyway.
Then you can pick favorites. You can tell them, you're my favorite child. There's only one. I tell my son, you're my favorite son. Yeah, and he has two sisters, so
yeah, I mean,
that's how that cookie crumbles.
Yeah. What do you do about the girls, though?
My middle child, I call her by her name and say, "You're my favorite Iris," and you're my, so I tell them they're my favorite of who they are. Right.
It's funny. Let's go back to like those first few years of your wedding business. You have a family. How were you managing, or if you were managing the elusive work-life balance?
In those early years, Jane, a lot of it was just do stuff and find out. That did lead a lot to me feeling like I couldn't turn it off. Like it was like I was in work mode all the time. And even when I was spending time with the kids or with my wife, it was tough to turn that off. And I think that a lot of the journey to having more of a work-life balance is learning, well, what can you and your family handle? What's healthy? And making adjustments on the fly. Again, in the early stages, a lot of it was I had the desire before we even started the business to have close connection with my family. So, we already knew we're like, hey, Michelle was going to stay at home. She wanted to do that. So that was kind of an advantage because now instead of both of us all the time working and paying astronomical prices for daycare, now we've already kind of got that closeness because we've created an environment that I think benefited us a lot to where Michelle could work when she wanted to, which for any stay-at-home moms out there, if you're doing nothing but stay-at-home momming,
it's hard.
My goodness, it's tough.
It's harder. I forgot to sign my kid up last week for camping. I was like trying to juggle. I was like, oh, I don't know how people do this.
Yeah. Well, my revelation was when I'm trying to remember what the scenario was, but essentially Michelle was gone for like a few weeks or something on some trip, and I was dad. I was stay-at-home dad. Oh my gosh. I need you to come home. And it was harder than my day job.
Absolutely.
And that was eye-opening. I gained way more respect for my wife that I should have had before, but didn't because I just hadn't had that experience. But we began having that dynamic where, okay, she can work as she has the freedom to, and it gives her a break from just being the parent. I can fill in for her when she's doing that. Early on, and this was before AI editing, she would do a lot of the editing. She had specific roles that she would take on. And so we already had some of that delegation that business owners should have. For most photographers, if you're shooting, a decent amount, or even if you're not shooting that much, but you want to shoot more, I think a great thing to do is at least start finding a way that you can make that editing process either super streamlined and or outsourcing, whether it be, if you can do it with AI, great. If you can't, find someone to do it. And guess what? The first company may not work. The second one or the fifth one or the sixth one might not work. But I think delegation is one of those things that you keep on trying it and doing it. And you have to be strict about it and you have to be committed to it, because eventually something will click. And because it's just so unsustainable to, as a business owner, take on everything yourself.
Yeah, you can't do everything.
You have to be realistic. It goes back to that whole caring for yourself thing. Being a photographer and not editing and doing everything, then just taking photos and interacting with customers is enough in and of itself.
Yeah.
That alone is a lot of work.
It's a full-time job. And then you have
it's a full-time job.
Marketing, you have the accounting, you have everything. I was lucky in the fact that I learned about outsourcing editing. I say this, we learn from everything, right? I was in the hospital, and it was right around Christmas time, and it was an emergency surgery that I needed, and I was out for a week, and everyone's like, where's your Christmas cards? Where's my birth announcements? And my sister, bless her heart, I was like, I need to edit. And she was like, this is ridiculous. She found me an editor. By the time I recovered and then the images were sent to I was like, oh, I like this a lot.
Yeah.
I found an editor that worked with me. And I will say, you're right, trial and error, but she edited better than me. She also did it so much faster than I would do. So the amount I'm paying her to do it, I can be shooting more. So I can be making more money. So finding that balance of, you should be charging for your time to edit. When we first come into it, you sort of don't necessarily think that, I'm going to get faster. By the way, you really don't get faster. You get pickier as you get, you know what I mean? You're like, or you get cleverer. You're like, I'm going to now do this thing with AI and like compose and do this. But the time it takes doesn't really change. But when you come into it, I'm going to get so much faster at this. No, you just get pickier and you're like, now I need to get that trash can out of every single image that you didn't.
I'm a big believer, Jane, and this is kind of a question back towards you, is I think that for someone that is looking to be more successful, they shouldn't wait to get a CRM.
Right.
They shouldn't wait to get an editor. If you're not super busy, this is like the best time to get a CRM in preparation for becoming busy. And plus, identity is a huge thing. If you see yourself as a prepared, successful photographer with systems, I'm a strong believer that certain subconscious gateways open up for you to then become more successful. But so many times I talk to people, I'm trying to go full time. I'm like, do you have a CRM? Do you have an editor? No. Well, your brain is telling you you don't have room for growth because you don't have systems in place. And so some of that stuff is probably just mechanisms to keep you safe, to keep you from destroying yourself. If you listen to like any entrepreneurs talk about some of the most dangerous things in business, it's not, we ran out of funds and it's often we were so successful and we weren't prepared. And so we destroyed our business.
Yeah, I agree. It's not just taking photos, but think of the amount of tasks that we do. I actually think the first thing you should outsource is an accountant. Your creative brain, you're not going to want to do it, and you're not good at it.
Not your thing.
And I will tell you, my accountant will save me more money each year than I pay him. And the sanity.
The sanity alone.
The sanity alone. The intricacies. I mean, with sales tax, like for New York, it's changed 3 times in 14 years of how you charge sales tax as a photographer. I don't want to know. Just you do it. So let's talk a little bit about clients. You got a little bit pickier, but what, over your nearly 10 years now, next year, of photographing weddings, do you have any red flags?
I think that anything that falls outside of people indicating that they've already connected with us on our website is a red flag. And so we've gotten more strict over time, because it used to just be, okay, red flags are when we see bad things. If they just say, oh, I'm interested in pricing and or the first thing they send you is, hey, we've got a big shot list. there's so many little negative red flags that has popped up over the years that we're like, okay, this person is not going to be fun to deal with. They just don't seem like our type of person. We're fine with people that are type A. And we've actually done really good with type A type people because I'm very good at managing type A people.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like, I'll over organize you. I mean, I will get more organized than you.
I don't fear being really direct. There's photographers like, I don't like brides that are like this. We have a planner that refers us. And when she refers us, it's typically with a bride that needs someone to come in and be, hey, this is how we're doing things. That's it. That's what they need.
Yeah.
So we've had one funny story. We had a bride, that wonderful person, super sweet, but she was a little type A. At one point was completely convinced that the first look was supposed to happen 20 minutes ago. And I know the schedule. No, it's not for another 30 minutes. This is not me telling her this yet. There's people coming to me, hey, the bride is freaking out because she thinks she's already supposed to do her first look. So I walk over to her room and I look her in the eye and I say, stop. Your first look is in 30 minutes. You want good pictures. Stop.
But I don't know how people do that on like, I mean, I photographed one wedding. That's how much I photograph weddings. One and done.
I don't blame you.
No.
I get it.
And it was a friend and it was a chill wedding. I'm such a control freak. You know, there's too many people talking. The groomsmen actually were the ones that annoyed it for me. I'm like, take your sunglasses off. And I was getting really annoyed and they just thought my English accent was really cute. And I was like, all right, this is really annoying. I'm actually angry right now and you don't know it. She was probably just spiraling from nerves and you were able to just calm her. And I see that with, you know, my new moms. They've got hormones out the wazoo, but if you can calm them and center them and like, you're in control and it's okay. And I love that, what you said. You're okay. But that's what people need in those situations. We're more than photographers, which is, you know, we're therapists.
From talking to other photographers, Jane, they tend to, because they're creative, they fear those scenarios, or they fear the type A person that is, you know, less creative and they need a strict timeline. I've just come to not fear those because I realize that what they need someone else to come in and make them feel like I had it.
You had the control.
And they didn't.
Yeah.
They needed to feel like they could give up control. Right. And they give these signals that they're not in control. And so they feel like they have to be in control.
Got it.
The bride doesn't want to feel like she's in control in her wedding. Maybe there's some out there that do. They want to feel like they're floating down a river of bliss.
Yes.
So the red flags for us are more so when people don't fill out our inquiry form and indicate that they've connected with us on our website. So if they're not saying, yeah, I saw this and I really like this and it feels like, you know, it'd be awesome to work with you guys. If they're not using that sort of language, that's kind of our first red flag. Now, if we get them on a consult call and they're not qualifying themselves, that's another red flag. But, you know, early on, it was so tough because we didn't have enough inquiries coming in. I feel like I just need this. Yeah. I need this. And the place of neediness, it is so hard to avoid red flag clients because you're exuding this neediness, which there might be someone that could be a really ideal client for you, but they pick up on the neediness, and the psychological response to that is to start looking for things that are wrong.
Right.
Versus if they connect, and this is going back to connection, if someone connects with you, it's a total switch in their brain because they're going from their amygdala and a fear response to a prefrontal cortex response of identity and ease. It's so weird to say this, but I've learned to know when someone is operating from their prefrontal cortex versus their amygdala. And if I see that someone is not transitioning into prefrontal cortex thinking in their interactions with me, that's a red flag for me because I know at the end of the day, the deliverable in the product is the photograph. And if the deliverable is the photograph itself, then I've lied to them.
Right.
I'm a deceiver because for them, when they look at the photographs on our websites or in our portfolio, wherever they're seeing their photographs, they're looking at other people and they're imagining themselves in those photographs. So they're seeing this beautiful picture, you know, if it's a family photograph, they're going, oh, I could see me and my family in there. And that's great until they get their photos and it's them and they see their insecurities and that's not what they imagined originally. Originally, they projected themselves in the photograph. Right. So it's completely positive. But now they've got the photograph and it's them and there's negativity. Even if it's subconscious, it's still there. And so for photographers, for us to really make truly happy customers, I am completely convinced that the deliverable has to be a expanded sense of their own identity. And if they've got that, if the photographs are an expanded sense of their own identity, when they see the photographs, it confirms their identity.
Yeah.
But you can't help someone expand their own sense of their identity if you haven't connected
Right.
with
And
them.
well, our role is to capture them as the extension of their identity. And if we're not connected, that just falls flat. And if they're even not open to you connecting with them, it falls flat. I 100% agree with that. That's why I can't do mini sessions. I can't in 15 minutes figure
Yeah,
out your
15
kid.
minutes. You don't know who they are really. Like,
I mean, I talk way too much as well, as you know, but so that's just me. I love that. I think it's also the experience of a shoot is key. And I think that we as a photographer are the directors of that shoot. If we're not connecting, or if you're just feeling stressed and you know, oh, I'm being forced here, I'd rather have a root canal. Then you look at the photos and you don't connect with them.
you feel more like you've been hired for a task. Right. That's where the commoditization of photography happens too, by the way. I think a lot of people miss that as they're stuck in charging lower prices. And a lot of it's because they're positioning themselves and allowing themselves in the mind of their potential customers to be seen as a service provider versus, oh, this is a person that's helping me to obtain an expanded sense of my identity. And I know that's got it to some people, probably some of the people listening to this now. Okay, that sounds super esoteric, but, and it is in a sense, but if you just learn to connect with people and how do I help them to see themselves, it's not even like so much of the education out there around marketing is like, okay, you got to either speak to their pain points or you got to really make them see you. There's this weird dynamic where marketers are like, don't talk about yourself. And I agree with that to a degree, but at the same time, like I see all these websites where people are just saying things like, I'll help you feel relaxed. You won't feel awkward in your photos. Those are all sort of like negative reinforcements,
right?
Where you're trying to speak to pain points. But if you look at luxury brands, this is one of the things I've done over the past 8 years, is I've made it a duty to study luxury brands that have been around for a long time. Think like Rolex and Chanel. And I've tried to become a student of the way that they market because they don't market based off pain points. They market based off identity. Rolex, for example, and it's probably not up now, but they had a video that would play when you went to the Rolex website. And it's a watch that was originally designed, get this, to be marketed towards adventurers, which is an identity. It wasn't to be marketed to someone that in their free time, they went to the beach. It was marketed to people in their free time, they would climb mountains. So this watch, it's just a video panning around it. And in the reflection of this steel watch that costs $12,000 or whatever, you could see a guy hiking up a mountain.
Yeah.
Where's the pain point marketing in that? Oh, you need a watch that tells really good time.
Don't be late.
That costs a lot to climb a mountain. So buy Rolex. Here's an identity. If you buy this, it confirms your identity.
I love that.
That's what we can do as photographers. I know from a place where I couldn't afford family photos back in the day.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't afford family photos. I couldn't afford our wedding photographers. It's funny because they became really good wedding photographers, but we were their first wedding. They were friends of ours. They said, can we shoot your wedding? We were just going to elope and do a little thing. And our family found out and said, hey, we want you to have a big wedding. We go, well, cool, if you'll pay for it. So when we had our friends come in and say, oh, we'll shoot it, we were like, sure. I know what it's like to not to be able to afford photos. As we began to afford it, I feel like I'm a different type of person because I can afford to have really nice photographs of my family.
Right.
So we could afford the photographer that would give us really nice with a specific style and a specific quality. It was very much for us an identity thing more so than, oh, well, we need some family photos. And I just think that our marketing a lot of times when we are in a place of neediness and we're thinking about ourselves as a service provider, we get put into that category in their mind, and then they don't look at their photos as much as an expanded identity tool as they do a commodity that now they look at us as just a button pusher.
I've actually thought of it more as it's the whole experience. So when they look back at the photos, they remember just the fun they had, how they were as a kid, what they were like as a kid, and can capture the moment. But it's also, we're capturing memories that 15, 20, 50 years from now, people are looking back on and that's who I was. That's who I was at that point. I love that.
The experience is, I would classify it to affirm your point. Jane. The experience is an extension
Right.
of
No,
that.
that's what I think. So I think we're saying the same thing. Yeah.
I think you can't have a good experience truly without having the
Yeah,
connection. And they go hand in hand.
absolutely. Well, tell me about the funniest shoot you ever did. Speaking of connection.
Oh
I
man,
mean,
that's a
it's
good
hard though,
question.
right? You have a lot?
Yeah,
Or funniest part of a shoot?
I think the funniest shoot would probably be when there was somebody that we knew, sort of friend of a friend sort of things, that it was a senior session. And we don't shoot senior sessions, but it was a friend of a friend. I had already tried to convince Michelle we shouldn't get outside of our zone of genius. But Michelle was like, well, but they really want it. And so she goes, oh, I'm going to shoot it. Michelle is fantastic at editing, and she has such an artistic eye. She's not as good at directing people. She was going to go shoot it, and I wasn't there. This is a senior session, and she feels really awkward. And Michelle has always been used to working with me. The shoot goes really bad.
You're throwing Michelle under the bus for your funny photo shoot? Come.
This way,
Right, I know. Right.
I have nothing but good things.
I know,
to say. I would not be, listen, if Michelle and I hadn't, because originally when I said, Michelle, we should be wedding photographers, she looked at me and she goes, no.
I'm kidding. I'm teasing you.
She originally was not in. And so I started doing
about the shoot. I'm just laughing.
I will tell you, my editing style is a source of a great embarrassment when we first started. 99% of that, you should keep your day job, that my mentor had, one of our first mentors said, was because of me. It was not because of Michelle. But this was a scenario where I don't want to shoot a senior session. I feel awkward. So that was weird. Okay, you can tell they're not happy. A lot of our clients, I feel like, have pretty high self-esteem, and it's not too difficult. With the senior session, it was just a whole nother ball game. We rescheduled, we both did it, and we worked so good together, and it went great. And so that was, I don't know if that's funny.
Well, it's interesting because it's like, stay in your lane. I wish seniors were a thing in my area, but they're not. I shouldn't have shot my friend's wedding. I think there's some things where we get out of our comfort zone, and I don't think I'd be that great at shooting a guy's senior session, even though I'm a family photographer. I feel for Michelle.
Yeah.
I think senior photography is actually really quite difficult. A lot of it is the psychology of the teen.
100%. We did it together. So that follow-up session, we did it together.
And you were both awkward.
I had just done it by myself. It was good because we were both there. I felt that awkwardness. I'm used to posing couples. Right. I don't know what I'm doing. But it was the fact that Michelle then bloomed. She's okay, hey, let's get her hair like this. So Michelle could do her typical recognition of what a woman needs to feel attractive, especially when it's just her, which she does during our engagements and our weddings anyhow.
You're lucky on a wedding that you have both sides of the brain. When I've done things like corporate headshots, I do it to deseasonalize my business. I need two assistants. I need one to fix the hair and this, that, and the other, because it's so busy. But even with senior session, you're focusing on the shooting and she's focusing on the details. And that's where you kind of do need an assistant or partner.
I'll tell you one quick one that was less embarrassing for me, but just funny, was when we had a family shoot that was at we're in Kentucky. So there's these distilleries. It was a pretty good sized family. So there's lots of people, and we need Uncle Joe. Everybody's there. The sun is starting to set and we're running out of light. So we're having to move 50 people, several inches forward, and there's so many trees around. So it's like we have this shortening window, and everybody's like, where's Joe? Where's Joe? Phone calls start being made. People are running around. Turns out Joe decided to go on the tour, bourbon tasting distillery tour. So that one was more just straight, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, this isn't my fault.
Did you get Uncle Joe? Like, now I feel like no closure. Did you get him?
This has been a number of years back. I think we did get a hold of Uncle Joe. I'm pretty sure from my memory we did, but that was less stress on me, in a sense of like, I'm not doing anything wrong.
I know, but that gives the Uncle Bob wedding photographer a little bit of, where's the Uncle Joe? That's funny. That's good. All right, we're wrapping up now. What is the one tip you would give to a new photographer?
Easiest actionable advice is to just find something to do and do it. And be prepared to make mistakes and find answers as you make those mistakes. That's the practical advice. From a higher level, more philosophical advice. I think the biggest thing is you get your vision come up with an actual vision, then create a business plan to get you there. So you're not just either doing random stuff and or spending a bunch of money you don't need to. Then tacked onto that, more philosophical advice is I'm still a big believer in mentors. I don't think I had the best mentors, but I do think that, like early on, I'm saying, but I learned a lot still, even from those that were very crucial to where we are now. Do stuff, because if you get caught up in the weeds and you just don't do anything, you won't make any progress. But sort of tamper that with have a point, a North Star that you're trying to get to, and a reverse engineered plan to get you there. And I just think it's hard to do that on your own. And so being either in a community of other people that are doing the same thing and or having a mentor that can direct you a lot and open your eyes, that somebody that really cares about you, is worth its weight in gold.
I agree. And it also will save you a ton of time and money, and I love the vision, because I think you can have a vision for your business, but also a vision for your life at the same time of what is this business bringing to your life and how to get there. Also, you have to be somewhat realistic. You're a new mom and you have no backup childcare. You can't really go be a birth photographer because you'll be on call for 4 weeks. How is it going to fit into your current lifestyle? But there are other photography types you can do. In wrapping up this fantastic hour, and I could probably talk to you all day, tell our audience how they can find you.
Probably one of the best places to start is I've created a guide. And this guide is my thinking on how to grow your business in the most efficient way possible. And it links to, like, we've got a Facebook group. And of course, people will follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And typically on those, the handles at The Real Jeff Armstrong. But the guide, to get to the guide, you just go to jeffarmstrong.education/Jeff's guide. So JEFFS-GUIDE. It's the best place for people to really go to get an idea of, I guess, my philosophy and what they can do to start growing their business in a meaningful, easy as possible way. It's never easy. I don't think anybody should expect easy when starting and growing a business, but there are definitely harder ways to do things, and there's easier ways
and
to
learn
do
from
things.
our mistakes. So hopefully.
100%.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. I really, really do appreciate having you on.
Likewise, Jane. Thank you for having me. And I just appreciate you so much, and keep on helping the way you are. I think you are obviously a huge blessing to so many people. And so just privileged to be able to spend time with you.
Thanks, Jeff. Now I'm going to cry because I have ADHD and I cry.
Sounds good. I'll go cry once I'm off of here, like.